Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
Mike Mason from Chaosium.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about your books. Today, viewers, we're going to talk about A Time to Harvest, Death and Discovery in the Vermont Hills. And I peeked into this book, and I have to say I was disturbed because I don't know if you know this, Mike. I'm actually living in Massachusetts. And,
It's
and I'm not anywhere near the city. And a lot of times when I'm done with work, I travel home in the back roads in the night through the woods. So I started peeking at this, like maybe I'll wait. I'll wait a little bit when there's more sun outside to read this. Time to Harvest. This is a collection of adventures. Am I right?
yeah. So it's a series of adventures. There's actually six in all that actually form a campaign. So um, technically, it's a five-part campaign, and there's actually a sixth bonus scenario that can be part of the campaign if you want it to be. Or you could, if you decide actually you don't want to play that in the campaign, you could actually engineer it to be a standalone scenario. It's the reason it is a kind of bonus and a separate one is it's very very pulpy in terms of the setup of the scenario. So we felt that if you were playing like a standard Call of Cthulhu version of this campaign, you may not want to play that as written because it may be too pulpy for you. But if you are playing a pulp version of the campaign, because obviously you can do that with this particular campaign, it's written for both normal Call of Cthulhu and Pulp Cthulhu. You probably do want to add in the bonus scenario because it is very pulpy, and because of that, it's really cool. So we wanted to kind of every group to have the option and every keeper to kind of consider whether it was going to be something that would be good for their group, either as part of the campaign or as a standalone adventure.
Hmm. A while ago, you released Mansions of Madness, which I thought was superb, and there was a theme in each story where there was some sort of haunted house in some way attached to it. Is there anything like that, a theme for Time to Harvest?
Well, the theme really for A Time to Harvest is well, I guess there's two really. It's very much that kind of New England area. In one sense, is part of the kind of the fabric of the campaign because that's where it all takes place um, in Arkham and in Vermont, where you start the campaign. But the other aspect is you are playing nominally students or academic staff from the Miskatonic University in Arkham. And the whole premise of the campaign is that you actually begin heading out on this, I guess, mini expedition by the university to Vermont, where there's where you're undertaking you're either undertaking research into the local folklore, or you're a more scientific kind of based student, and you're doing geology samples and studying the geology of the mountains in the area. And so these two kind of halves of the student group go to Vermont to look into these things, and then things happen, and the campaign kind of tracks that, and so you have your time in Vermont, and then you go back to university, and there are repercussions from your from the field trip, and so the whole kind of chapter that takes place in Miskatonic University while you're there, and then the campaign kind of moves on again. It stays within this kind of the area. Although there is there's a little sidetrack kind of bonus adventure that if you wish you can take a little excursion to Canada to somewhere near Montreal, I think, in the kind of French speaking parts of Canada, for a little side quest adventure, which can be quite fun as well. So there's a lot, although it's New England based, there are little side tracks here and there as well. But it's not a globe spanning campaign like Masks of Nyarlathotep or even Horror on the Orient Express, where you're traveling around Europe. It's very, very focused on North America. And because of that, because the scale is a little smaller, it's a much more friendly campaign to newer and novice keepers. So if you've not yet run a big campaign and you're really only starting your gaming with Call of Cthulhu, but you're looking to kind of get into campaign play rather than a series of one-shot plays, this is an ideal campaign for you to start campaigning with, because it's got a very tight focus. There's a lot of advice and help to how you run the campaign in the book, and it's really good fun. And it equally, obviously, if you're an old hand and you played many Call of Cthulhu games, it's a campaign that you can have a lot of fun with too, because it's got some great villains. It's in some real kind of classic, settings like Miskatonic University, the Orne Library, Arkham, and so forth. So there's a lot of really cool things if you're an experienced group that you want to kind of play around. So it does a lot of things, but all of them, I think, it does them pretty well. And the actual plot was developed by an old kind of hand of Cthulhu, Brian Sammons, and him and Charles Zaganis kind of came together and got the idea together of the actual campaign. And then it was actually written by Brian and also Glyn Owen Barris, who kind of put all the kind of first draft together and got it into shape. And then it came in-house, and myself and Lynn Hardy kind of then worked on it and added little bits here and there, and just streamlined where we could to make it as easy and as fun to play as possible, really. And it's a very fun campaign. And in fact, recently on the Chaosium YouTube channel, one of our play groups has actually played through the entire thing, and they've now been releasing. They're in the middle of releasing various episodes from their campaign play. So if you want to kind of get a sense of how it runs, or get some tips and things on another group running it, you can watch it all on YouTube as well. So that's kind of good preparation if you're thinking about buying it or you are going to run it, and you can watch those and see how another group handled it.
Oh, if I find that link, I'll put it in the description below. I think that's really interesting. Sure. So if I may ask, what was the inspiration? I mean, I'm always curious, because sometimes Chaosium picks some very interesting settings every time. For this one particularly, what were your inspirations behind it?
I think what attracted me to the kind of the concept that Brian and Glyn and Charles had put together with the work they did on the campaign was that it did have a very tight focus, and so it was somewhat different to the traditional kind of classic campaigns for Call of Cthulhu, which are very big, very kind of many moving parts. You as a keeper have got to kind of keep a handle on, and can take a minimum of a year, if not 2 or 3 years, to play all the way through. So what was very attractive about this campaign was that you could play this in a much shorter length of time. It's got very narrow focus in terms of the scope of the scenarios, and so in that sense they are easier to run, but it also allows you to get quite deep into them if that's what you want to do. And because they're all set in North America, there's a little bit more familiarity, particularly obviously if you're an American player, you're a little bit more familiar with it. And also for European players, we are kind of familiar with that kind of area through 40 years of Call of Cthulhu scenarios, a lot of them being set in the New England area. So I think all these things make the campaign quite an attractive kind of campaign for your kind of novice and intermediate level keepers. So that's what really attracted me. And the reason I'm talking about this and not particularly the plot is because if I start getting into the plot, I'm going to spoiler it, because one of the cool things is the villains in this. And I really can't say any more, but they're really cool. And there's loads of new insights and rules and stuff that has been written about in this new book about these villains. And I can't spoiler it, but there's lots of really cool stuff to kind of enjoy. So if you like mythos monsters and cultists and all that kind of stuff. There's a good dose of that within the book as well, that comes in various sort of shapes and sizes. So there's all of that, and there's also some new kind of guidance on creating student characters to as part of your group, and it comes with I think it's got 10 ready-made investigators. So if you don't want to go through the rigmarole of rolling up your own characters, you can just use the pre-generated ones that are in the book. And if you don't use those and you make your own, you've got 10 characters to use as replacement characters should anyone, fall foul during the campaign. So you've got a little extra resource in there as well. So that's all really cool. And there's tons of artwork by all manner of really great artists. There's Mally Ware and Alberto Bontempi and Caleb Cleveland and Emma Desiati and Victor Lesser. I'm looking at all this list here. There's some really great names, and Loic Mousy as well, who's done a lot of our cover work as well. But the cover this one is done by Caleb Cleveland, who is an old hand of drawing fantastic art for Call of Cthulhu over many years. So it's really nice to see his cover of a dark young on the cover and some investigators, which is really cool. And of course, loads of really cool maps and handouts for the keeper and the players, which have been designed by our resident cartographer Matt Ryan, and they look fantastic. And Nick Nicario has put that all together and laid it out in the book to make it just look great, but also very easy to run, because the information's in just in a format that's kind of very accessible to navigate yourself around the book when you're running it. So, as I say, I think all the ingredients are there for it to be a great campaign, and hopefully people will have a great time playing it. And I look forward to reading people's stories inevitably that appear on the internet, on Facebook and Discord and whatnot, and how the groups are faring. And it's always fun to see.
If I may ask, I just want to step away from the book for a second, talk about the themes of farmlands and forests. So for those that are not familiar with Massachusetts, I know the first images you may get will probably be like the Revolutionary War and stuff like that, muskets. But Massachusetts and up in Upper England there's a lot of farmland, a lot of people that are very set in the old ways. So I'm talking about I'm talking about like keeping things very traditional. For example, Concord, Mass. If you're a business, your building has to look like a colonial building from back in the day. But there's something about these forests and farmlands that are eerie, and I'm trying to put a pin exactly what it is. Like there's always some sort of fear and dread about it. Like if you look at Children of the Corn, for example, that's a great example of something that it shouldn't be eerie. Farmland, you think about life and food and things like that, and there's this weird sense of dread about it. Well, if I may ask, what is your theory? What are your thoughts about what is it about these environments that could be really eerie?
I think, I think it's a really true thing in that it's the if you look at a film, it's a good example. It's a film like the Witch that came out a few years ago. I don't know if you've seen that one. That's a great visual representation of what I'm about to say. Is you have a community, which is the town or village, where things are pretty normal, and you don't have this sense of dread, and you don't really touch the outside because your inward focus, your commerce, is in the village, city, whatever it is. And in the Witch, you have the group that leave the village, and they are in the countryside, but they work the land and they have their farm. And so within the bounds of their works area, it's a known space, and so it's familiar, and therefore not really that scary. But literally just going beyond the farm into the dense forests, you're suddenly into technically no man's land, this kind of wilderness, this unclaimed nature that's just on the edges of civilization, and that harbors the unknown. And we go back to Lovecraft's very famous quote. The fear of the unknown is the biggest fear. So, and that is literally embodiment. The wild forests and mountains of Vermont and New England, Massachusetts it's this virgin land filled with the unknown, but it's kind of literally on our doorstep. If we live in New England, it's literally on your doorstep, and it doesn't take very long to get out into the wilderness, where you are again. This very, again, the analogy is there. You're this very small person or very small part of life in this vast nature, just like humanity is this very small thing in the middle of the cosmos. It's a kind of mirror image of that. And so, we have that kind of innate kind of, sense of self-preservation, which we call fear, because it's the unknown, what could be in the woods. And obviously to kind of bring that back up to speed, when people, whether they're, native peoples of the Americas or people that, came to those shores later on, everyone has their own folklore. Some of it is intermixed and it's kind of grown together over years. Some of it is obviously still separate, but it's still folklore. And we have stories about things, we all have stories about, what happens if you go off into the woods at night on your own. Bad things will happen. The werewolf will eat you, or the ghost will get you, or whatever it is. These are all, this is all folklore we learn. And New England is a very rich, bloodstream of folklore like that. And so that helps to compound this sense of the other, this sense of the unknown, and ultimately this sense of, strangeness on our doorstep. And that's a very long-winded answer, but I think that's kind of partly what we're talking about when we sort of say this.
Is it a book, like an intermediate book? Can newbies play this book?
Yeah, I think people who are relatively new to the game will be able to find this book quite accessible. It's presented in such a way that it's the information is kind of logically kind of grows, and also because the campaign is in a sense reasonably linear in terms of what's coming, rather than it being a vast range of choices. In this sense, because it's very focused, while you're in Vermont, in the town of Cobb's Corners, all your focus is on the town of Cobb's Corners. So that you can prepare for that quite easily, and obviously the material in the book helps you to do that. It's not like a big campaign like Masks, where you may be in Cobb's Corners, but during the scenario, all the players decide they're going to go to Italy because they think that would be a good idea. That won't happen in this campaign because it's much more, has a much tighter focus. You've still got player freedom, but it's within a kind of a more of a defined kind of ring fence in terms of the gameplay and where it's taking place. So because of that, it's very accessible to newer keepers in that way. So that's why I think it's a very attractive and fun campaign for people who have picked up maybe the Call of Cthulhu starter set and played those adventures, maybe picked up Doors to Darkness or Gateways to Terror and played a few of those, and now looking for something a little bit more substantial that's got some longer gameplay. They've got a group together and they now really want to get into a good plot, and this is exactly what that would provide.
Excellent. Well, you definitely sold me on this. Is there anything else about this book that I haven't asked you about that you want to share?
I'm just trying to think, because obviously it's really difficult when you're talking about a campaign book, because, as I say, it'd be very easy to spoiler what's inside. As I say, there's a whole load of maps, and they are all provided, with the keeper notes. But there's also a whole set of the same maps without any notes on them for the players to use, and so they could be used on the gaming table, or they can be, if you've got the PDF, you can load them to a virtual tabletop and use it in that way as well. So there's those kind of resources that are kind of built into this book, which which are kind of built into all of our books these days, to make them as versatile as possible. But it does provide you, as I say, 10 ready to play investigators that you can use, and also there's a whole appendix on magic that can come up in the campaign, spells that certain characters may have access to, and a lot of them are quite folklore, because they're coming from the kind of folklore of the region. So things about blessing or blighting farmers' crops or causing disease and all that kind of very folky kind of magic. There's a kind of an appendix that kind of collects a lot of that together. There's some, mythos, but much more mythosy magic in there too. But again, it just helps to, all of the key spells that are in the campaign are collected at the back. So it's an easier, quicker reference point than actually having to pick up the rule book or the Grand Grimoire to kind of work out what a spell does. We try and put it all together in this one to make it as easy for the keeper to do, to use. And I think, as you mentioned, throughout the campaign, there's plenty of advice and kind of tips for the keeper on how to handle particular situations or points in the campaign that present a number of options that the players might consider. So the keeper is kind of well informed and can kind of knows where to go next if the players decide to go to B rather than A in that sense, as they follow the clues and work out exactly what a time to harvest is all about and what the title means too.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this book. Viewers, I believe A Time to Harvest and Cult of Cthulhu are now out in print, so you can order them at or pick them up at your local role-playing game store. So yes, stay tuned. I'm actually going to ask Mike a few more questions about the starter set, so stay tuned for that video coming up shortly. Mike, thank you so much for this, and
you're very welcome. I did just want to, you just made me think actually, if you are buying the book from your local friendly gaming store, do check that they are part of the Bits and Mortar scheme, which is free for the store to be a part of. It just means that you get the PDFs as well with the print book, included with the print book when you buy it. Obviously, if you buy it direct from Kaizen, you get the PDF for free as well as a print book anyway. But obviously, we do like to support your local gaming store, and all they've got to do is sign up for Bits and Mortar online. Just search for it. It's totally free for the retail store, and it just means that you as a customer get the PDFs as well.
Yeah, definitely ask your store about that. Take advantage of that. That's a great deal. Excellent. Thank you everyone very much. Stay tuned for more news. We'll see you soon.